Yay! That was very nice, very sweet. Yay! Hello, everyone. Welcome.
I've been practicing all day.
Have you? You've just been sitting in here with the microphone, working on the perfect tone and pitch. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 321.
We're officially up there.
Yeah, we've been up there for 320 episodes, but this is the one. I'm excited about tonight's episode. Kim can probably tell because of how much I've talked about it, kind of behind the scenes. Today, we get to be joined by an actual shoe developer, someone that helps bring shoe designs to life at Brooks. His name is Bryan Bhark. He's a friend of ours, and he's a local trail runner / FKT holder / badass. Total awesome athlete, runner. But then as his day job, he gets to bring shoes to life. And that's really what I want to talk about today. And it's going to be one of the first episodes I think that we've done that really dives into some of the specifics, some of the behind the scenes of what it takes to take a shoe from a concept drawing to something in hand, an actual tangible product, something that, you know, as a shoe reviewer, something I've always wanted to know more about and really wanted to get more detailed in. So today, our good friend Bryan Bhark is joining us to talk to us all about that process, what it takes to create shoes from beginning to end. We might get a little into the weeds today. Kim knows this, so Kim's going to probably try to keep me on point. But welcome, everyone, to Ginger Runner Live. The show begins now.
Ginger Runner.
Yay! What is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 321. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Monday to spend a little bit of it with us. I'm excited about tonight's show.
I had to think twice of whether or not it actually was Monday.
Time has
As
blended.
soon as you said the word Monday, I was like, are we doing the show on the wrong day?
Wait,
is it actually Monday?
Is it? It is Monday. It is August.
It's August, March.
It's August 1999.
Yeah.
Kim and I have been doing a daily live show for our Patreon subscribers every single day. We've been going live for 120 plus days, and the days begin to blend together. We have to constantly remind ourselves what day of the week it is, what day of the month, what year. But it's been fun. So when we do Ginger Runner Live once a week, it's more like, wait, what day is it? So it is Monday. It's episode 321. We're very excited about this. Our guest tonight is a shoe developer, basically a senior innovation developer for Brooks Running. Bryan Bhark is on the show tonight. He is a really seasoned ultra runner, trail runner, has some local FKTs, and just basically I've tried to keep up with them, and it's lasted about 10 feet. He's very fast.
That's
He's very
pretty
skilled.
good.
That's pretty good.
10 feet's pretty good.
He's a highly skilled runner, but also one of the people that brings shoes to life. So from concept art to actual fruition to tangible product, we're going to talk to Bryan and really start digging into what it takes to bring a shoe to market, what it takes to design a shoe. How do you appeal to a mass market? How do you appeal to specifically elites versus average runners? How do products happen? It's going to be, I feel like we're going to get into the weeds. I mentioned that already. I'm going to nerd out. I'm just warning everyone.
I also think this is the kind of show that you've been looking forward to doing
you
since you started Ginger Runner
Yeah.
Live. Because you really love to dig into every aspect of shoes.
I'd also say it's also one of the shows that I probably feared the most as a shoe reviewer, as someone who, when I started reviewing shoes, it was purely out of, this is my experience in this product. I didn't go to engineering school. I don't know a lot. At the time when I started, I knew nothing other than just, was the shoe good on my foot? Did it work? What are the things I liked? What are the things I disliked? And that sort of carried on over the years. And every time I post a review, in my mind, I'm going, there is a man or woman behind the scenes who helped design this shoe that's basically either pulling their hair out, throwing beer at the screen of the computer, or they're like, I like this guy. It's one of those three things.
They're taking notes and getting ready to send you hate mail.
I know that there are humans behind the scenes. So this is the show that I've been looking forward to the most because we know Bryan. We run into him on the trails fairly frequently, and we have mutual friends, and we've got a chance to run with him and watch him race and stuff. So I feel that there's good neutral ground. He's really good at what he does. I think he's gonna be really skilled at telling us how this stuff happens. But I also don't think he's going to write me hate letters or
he might
come leave a giant pile of doo-doo on our doorstep. That's the first time that sentence has ever come out of my mouth. Doo-doo. Before we dive into the show, though, of course, it's not just myself and Bryan, our guest who we'll introduce here in just a second. We also have the wonderful Kim.
Hi.
Hi.
What's up, everyone? Kim Tashima Newberry here. Welcome. If you are new, hello. We will be bringing Bryan on in just a second because we are live, because we'll be bringing Bryan on. We will be taking live questions. So if you have a question for Bryan regarding anything about shoes, just pop them into the chat room and we will ask him there.
Some other individuals that we'd like to thank at the top of the show are our Patreon supporters. It is because of them that we're able to do our live shows every Monday, our daily live shows, our weekly reviews or films. It is because of our Patreon crew. We call them our GR crew. If you would like to join our GR crew, if you haven't already, you can go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. For as little as $1 a month, you get to join that community. For $3 and above, you get daily live streams. So it's a bunch of content now, 120 plus hours of content you just go get. We're better than Netflix.
It's very high quality content too.
Very high quality, high tier, highbrow content. One individual in particular at that top tier we like to mention at the top of every Ginger Runner Live because he really has gone above and beyond. And even last week's show is a perfect example when we helped Emily reach her charity goal for Brave Like Gabe Foundation. When we reached $30,000, Bryan Sands. Bryan Sands is a wonderful supporter of this community, and we just like to shout him out at the beginning of every show because he also was in his running journey at the age of 50, ran his first marathon, then went on to run his first 50K. He's currently training for a 250-mile event. He's creating his own 100-mile course. He's doing everything. He's a super inspirational dude. So shout out to our good friend, Bryan. We appreciate that very much. So without further ado, I know that there's already questions popping up in the chat room. That's great. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest to the show. First time guest to the show, but long overdue, I'd say.
Yes.
Bryan Bhark.
Yay!
Hey.
How are you?
Welcome.
I'm doing fantastic. I will say, so Kim and Ethan, yes, we've known each other for a little over a year now, maybe a little bit more than that. But I've been a huge fan of the show since the beginning. Being a shoe developer kind of goes hand in hand with being a shoe geek. And I loved your reviews, love your show. And it's just been an incredible honor to have this opportunity to be on this show, to speak with you guys and talk shoes. So I'm super excited.
I mean, as am I and as is Kim, because we talk about shoes in our house often, very regularly. I think anytime we put on a pair of shoes to go out for a run, we're talking about something specific about it, not just, we don't treat shoes like this is just what I need to put on to go for a run. It's like, why am I choosing this today? What is this going to do for my run?
And also versus like going and getting fitted and going, oh, this is a shoe they told me I should run in. So this is what I'm running in.
Yeah.
Right? Like we are in a wide array of shoes.
We have a very unique position, right?
we think about shoes more than
most people. Probably not as often as you, but a lot for regular consumers.
Probably pretty close. I would say pretty close.
Hopefully. You're right, but for someone like you who's in your position, how do you look at? Let's just start with like shoe reviewers. So, is it scary when you have a shoe reviewer review something that you've worked on? Is it something where does it help you make decisions for the future versions of them? How do you treat that sort of connection with people who are reviewing products?
That's a great question. So I think we. Like in the footwear industry, we really rely on kind of this constant feedback loop because we want to make product better and we want to make sure shoes evolve and we push them in the right direction. And, being on the product creation team with a product line manager and a designer and then a developer like myself, a lot of sweat and tears go into bringing a concept to life. And there's a lot that goes into how this kind of all comes to be. It's typically 18 to 22 months, from the initial concept to it actually hitting market. And so over that period of time, when the shoe finally comes out, we're eagerly awaiting what people are going to say about the shoe. You do a lot of wear testing throughout the process, and you get an idea of how the shoe is doing relative to the last version, or like maybe other people who run in competitor shoes. And so you get a good pulse on how it's trending, but you really don't know until the shoe is out there. And then, I think there's shoe reviewers who go really into detail, others that kind of stay high level. But generally, you kind of hope that there's a consistent theme, good, bad, or otherwise, because I think all of it helps. It all gets you kind of pointed in the right direction. When you come out with a shoe and it gets a lot of mixed reviews, you're kind of scratching your head for a little bit, and you really have to start unpacking the pros and cons and a lot of the feedback and really try to micro-analyze every detail to better improve on the next one. But really, the shoes that you've reviewed that I personally worked on, my palms get sweaty, I get super nervous. I'm like, oh my goodness, like what is he gonna say? And then like immediately, I see the review and then I send it to the team, or like my team's like send it to me. So, word spreads super fast. And I think generally how the cadence of footwear creation works is that the feedback you hear in the market on a particular shoe typically can't affect the next version. It's usually the version after, because you're generally about 2/3 of the way through the next version. And so you kind of hope that the feedback is, in light of what you can affect 2 versions from now versus the next iteration. Because if you're just like, oh man, this one really tanked and we have a lot of work to do, then it's like, how is this next version doing? And so what you don't want to do is create a knee-jerk reaction and try and undo a lot of the work that you've been doing on the next version that is yet to be released. So.
I can only imagine. Well, we'll get into timeline here in a bit too, because I know that that's something that I've been thinking a lot more in the last 3 to 5 years of just how timelines work with a running shoe company, with any product I'm reviewing. Sure. Having the awareness that the product I'm reviewing is out to market, or maybe it's just about to be out to market, but you and your team is already working on the next version of that or another new shoe entirely. So I know that it's almost like anything I comment on may be addressed in two shoe versions, right? Yeah. So it's weird to do that math. And I know we'll probably dig into that a little bit.
It's also really interesting to see like when the mass majority of people have really strong feelings about a shoe and everybody's expecting it to be fixed with the next version and like nothing changes or it gets worse. Yeah. But then the following version, everybody's like, oh, like this is what we were asking for.
Totally.
And so I think like the connection that people may not make is the actual timeline of the situation.
Yeah, usually if I see something addressed in the next version, I'm like, oh, they knew that was a thing in their own internal testing and they fixed it in the next version. It had nothing to do with reviews. It was just they realized something. I want to get a little bit more history on you before we start getting into how your day-to-day is and how a product comes to fruition. Let's kind of get some background on how you got into trail running, how you became a developer in shoes innovation. Did you go to college for like how does one become what you are? So let's start with like college. Like what were you?
And we recently had somebody actually ask us this exact question. I think her nephew is really intrigued on kind of doing what you do, Bryan. But he was like, I don't really know.
I don't know where to start.
How do I get there?
Yeah. So I'll start off by saying you can get to where I am a million different ways, which is both cool and daunting at the same time. I have a kind of a different background than I think a lot of people do have in the footwear industry. So I went to college at West Point. I was a human factors engineering major. So I served 5 years active duty in the Army as an intelligence officer, and absolute blast. But I knew the entire time that, I had this other passion. I was always really intrigued by how things kind of came together, how you take things apart. And I've been a lifelong runner. I've been running since 8th grade, cross country, track, and then was on the marathon team while I was in college. And that passion for running continued to persist during my time in the Army and then even afterwards. And then there was this kind of prototypical transition of road running starts to feel a little bit stale, start getting out in the woods, do some trail running, fall in love with that, kind of get into the competitive side of trying to race and those sort of things. And, that passion has continued to this day. And so I think what was really interesting was, when I was getting ready to transition out of the military, I knew that I wanted to work in the outdoor industry. I knew that ideally it would be in the footwear industry. But to your point, I had no idea where to start. I had zero idea, like no contacts, didn't know anyone who worked in footwear development, or I didn't even really know what footwear development was at the time. I was like, well, I'm not a designer, so I didn't go to design school. But there has to be like someone who has more of an engineering background that helps put this stuff together.
Of course.
Turns out that is a developer. So what I actually ended up doing was I kind of networked for about a year and a half by going to as many trade shows as possible. So if you're actually active duty military, you can actually go to Outdoor Retailer and some of the other bigger trade shows for free, which was awesome. So I went to, I think, 3 Outdoor Retailer events in Salt Lake City, season after season after season, and just talk to as many people as possible. Trying not to come off as this desperate guy that's like getting ready to get out of the military and like really wants a job in the outdoor industry. It was really just trying to make some connections, understand what the industry was about. Sure enough, there are a lot of veterans in the industry, which was great to see. And I made a lot of great friends during that time. And really just one connection led to the next. I was at another trade show and happened to stop by the New Balance booth and was talking to a lady there. And she was a product development manager. And we're just talking about backgrounds, those sort of things. And she could clearly tell I was a super shoe geek. And so she was like, well, why don't you, send me your resume? We'll let you know if there are any development spots that open. And so sure enough, like a month and a half later, I got an email from her. She was like, hey, we're going to post this development position. I applied for it. It was actually originally on the domestic development side. So it was for kind of the made in the U.S. shoes, the domestic shoes that New Balance makes. So not in performance running. Then I was just like, hey, whatever it takes. I want to get my foot in the door. I want to learn as much as I can. Development sounds amazing. Yeah. And during the interview process, I think basically everyone realized, hey, this guy's a crazy running shoe geek. So at that time, there was someone who who left New Balance, went to another company, created a vacancy in the performance running side. And so really my first job out of the military was basically my dream job. So started as a footwear product developer at New Balance, getting to work with an incredible team of people, a lot of athletes, working on products like the New Balance Zonte and various versions of the 1400, the 880, 860, and just had such a great experience and such incredible exposure to all aspects of footwear creation. Got to do an extended stint in Asia for about 3 months, which was great to see how the things actually come together.
Yeah.
And then I was at New Balance for about 2.5, just not quite 3 years. And then I had the opportunity to come to Brooks, and I had previously lived in Washington. And you only have to live here once to fall in love with it. And so I was like, man, that'd be a dream gig. Brooks had always been kind of that pinnacle running shoe brand for me, growing up running in Brooks shoes, and being able to couple that with moving to the Northwest, which is also where my wife is from. So it was just kind of the whole package in a nutshell. So made the move and been here for 5 years. So it's been an incredible ride. But that's kind of how I made the move into this position. So
I love it, and I'm actually really curious. Just with you said is it person interaction engineer?
Oh, human factors engineer.
Human factors engineer.
Yep.
So we talk about in college. I remember I have friends that were civil engineers, and they call them the poop engineer, and other types of engineers that had like very specific things. So with a human interaction engineer, what does that mean? Or not human interaction, human factors. I don't know why interaction's in there.
Yes.
What's that the study of?
So basically, you're understanding how humans interact with machines. So like one of the more classic examples of a human factors engineer is someone who creates the layout of the interior of a car or an aircraft. Buttons have to be visible or reachable within a certain length. They have to be accessible. You have to be tuned into some of the audible cues that would alert that there's an issue. So it's really optimizing an interface, engineering an interface for that human to most optimally interact with. There's a lot of branches within human factors engineering. The branch that excited me most was more on the ergonomic side, which kind of translates more directly into product development on the footwear side. So yeah.
This is like one of the coolest things ever, because I didn't. Of course this exists. Of course this major exists. And, you know, I come from like a software end of things. So having worked in software for a majority of my adulthood and right out of college, sort of dealing with UI and UX, it sounds essentially the same, but with physical, tangible interaction. And
exactly. Yep.
I love it. I love knowing that there is this degree, this ability for a human to go through this process of learning this and what works and what doesn't work, and then the actual application of this in the physical, like employment world. We
have another human factors engineer in the chat room.
I knew we would. I had a feeling we'd have another someone who could relate here. So this is fascinating. So hearing your journey from New Balance and then to Brooks, how many of your shoes have I reviewed unknowingly? More than one?
How much hate mail have you sent under a different name, Bryan? I think that's what we're trying to get to here.
So,
do you have my face on a dartboard, and is it the target of your daily darts?
I have your face framed next to your head. So, quite the opposite of it.
That's funny, because I do too. I have my face, framed.
I think it's the same picture. So the Caldera, to the Hyperion Tempo, and then most recently the Catamount. I think those are the three shoes. I actually also Caldera 1. I believe you did review that as well.
I love that shoe, man.
Yeah. So the 1 and the 2, and then the Hyperion Tempo, and then the Catamount.
Do you have any input on the Pure line, or is the Pure line at this point blue for you guys?
So that was a little bit on its way out when I got there. I think we had a couple more iterations of the Pure Grit, but the Pure Connect and Pure Cadence, those shoes I think we're seeing maybe their last iteration around that time. So I didn't actually get to work on those models.
Got it.
They're super cool shoes though. I think there is a cult following to the old Pure line of shoes, which is. It says something. So
I think that's one of the other things that I think we can probably dive into at some point today. In my mind, I'm going, man, there's like 20 things I want to talk about.
I like that you're saying at some point today, like the show is going to last. It's going to be an all-day show.
But just the cult following, like sort of dealing with a brand that has a cult following, and then a specific shoe that people are like, this is it. This is my shoe forever. And watching those change.
Yeah, and like we do have some comments kind of around that type of thing. Like John is just asking, like, would it be a practical idea to have runners vote a shoe to stay in production? So like for the people that are really,
let's just say the green silence, for example, which has disappeared.
Come up.
I was gonna open with it, but I thought I'd save it for about 20 minutes in. So that's a great question. People voting on a shoe and that sort of thing. I can't imagine you leaving it up to the public.
I mean, that would be an incredible way to kind of crowdsource a lot of these decisions. I think ultimately, when we're planning a line architecture around the future product line, it goes really far out. And a lot of those are evolutionary. It's like, hey, you're always going to have another Ghost. You're going to have another Adrenaline. You're going to have another Glycerin. So it's like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. But then you have these like one-offs, like a Green Silence. And ironically, some of the shoes that have the greatest cult followings actually never sold a ton. And so from a business standpoint, it probably gets to a point where it doesn't make financial sense to continue the shoe.
Absolutely.
and you kind of have to drop it, or it's kind of served its purpose and it kind of has to move on. I'm a near and dear fan of the Green Silence. That's probably the shoe I gushed over the most during my interview at Brooks, and I could just see like the people I was interviewing with, just like, yep, we get this all the time. Yep, okay.
Let's take his resume and put it over here.
But I think like something that the Green Silence did that was way ahead of its time was just its how sustainable it was for a shoe back then. It was so consciously developed with sustainability in mind. Not to mention, it turned out to be an awesome marathon distance racing flat. It was kind of lumped into the whole minimalist movement or kind of more minimal shoe offerings. I think just because those sort of shoes were kind of emerging on the scene. But I think there were a lot of great design and development choices made on that shoe. I personally didn't work on that shoe. It was way before my time.
Right.
But again, yeah, I would love to see a shoe like that come back to life in the future. That'd be incredible.
I think we can get into some really interesting conversation here, just in regards to product development and the processes and the timeline. Before we do, though, we again are live with Bryan Bhark, Senior Innovation Developer with Brooks, and this is a great conversation. I'm so excited to have him on the show today. If you have questions for Bryan, the process, Brooks, shoes, shoe creation, any of that, jump into the chat. Kim will pull your question. She's got a bunch here. What do you got?
Did you even sleep last night thinking about the possibilities of the questions today?
I was sleep, like didn't sleep, just eyes wide open with my blanket pulled up around my chin.
Staring at your own photo of yourself on your nightstand. Bryan, you just mentioned sustainability a little bit there. Thad in the chat room asked, Bryan, how is Brooks innovating on building sustainability into shoe product life cycle, for example, materials or processes?
That's a great question. And that is front and center in a lot of the discussions we have today. I can't get into too many of the details around that, but I will say it is an issue that we're addressing head on. We have a long-term sustainability strategy. It first starts with transparency, right? And you see a lot of brands do this, and you need to do it authentically. And you need to be completely honest about what your environmental impact is. Everyone knows that shoes in general, running shoes, casual shoes, whatever, are incredibly detrimental to the environment. And so everyone in our brand is taking a conscious step forward in terms of how do we reduce our impact, how do we become smarter about fully circular product in the future, those sort of things, because it's really important that although we continue to grow our business and although we continue to innovate from a performance footwear standpoint, that sustainability is front of mind. So that's probably about as much detail I can go into. But yes, it is 100% top of mind for us, and it's a conversation we pretty much have every day. So
that's great. Let's start talking specifically process. So
sure.
Do you work only on new shoes? Like, is your department a new shoe developer, and then there's another department specifically for the next adrenaline, the next glycerin? Like, I think you called them Blue Sky, or a different department, Blue.
So I work on the innovation team, and so we have a team within innovation that we call ourselves Blue Line, and basically, that has a different function than a lot of our inline shoes. And so I say inline like everyone knows what inline means. I realize that's kind of a pretty industry-facing term, but basically a shoe that has a franchise behind it. So a shoe that has a consistent update, maybe year after year. It's on its 13th iteration right now. And basically, the footwear development team as a whole, for the most part, work on the inline models. And then me being over on the innovation side, working on some of these newer models that don't have any history to it to address a specific market need, maybe a specific athlete need, or trying to kind of provide a sneak peek in the future direction of our brand. So that's essentially where we're going. But yeah, it's a pretty big team that gets to work through all this stuff.
So now I think we can at least get an idea of the process. So do you have artists? Do you have sketch artists? Do you have do you all sit around a meeting table and go, what is the shoe that we need to come up with now?
And they all sit like,
yeah, everyone's cross-armed. There's a guy
like
with a cigar. Yep. Yeah. This is the shoe we need to design. Get on it, artists. So how does it work? And then what do you do when you take over?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have, our leadership team has kind of the strategic roadmap of all the shoes that need critical updates, when they get updated, what sort of update they will kind of exhibit. But at the same time, it's really the teams on the ground. So we talk about it kind of as a triad or a project team. So it consists of, like I mentioned earlier, a designer, a developer, and a product line manager. However, there are a lot of these other cross-functional teams that provide inputs into this triad, such as our biomechanics team, marketing team. We have essentially consumer insights team. So they all play a big factor. But we sit around, and as a team of usually 3 or 4, we're figuring out what the next iteration of this shoe needs to be. So like, what are we hearing in the market today? Where do we think the market is going? And that's really the onus of the product line manager, kind of the visionary of where the consumer is going, where the runner is going. And that provides inspiration to the designer and myself in terms of how much we can push, where we need to push, where we need to kind of stay conservative. And that really inspires the designer from a creativity standpoint to really put pen to paper and start sketching. It's like, hey, this is what the next version of the glycerin could look like, based on what we're hearing from the market, or we're making a deliberate decision to take this to the next level and really change it from what it's been before. And we understand the risks involved, but we kind of package that all up together in a product brief, and we present that back to the leadership. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, yeah, go for it. You guys have our support. So
Sweet.
That's kind of how it all kicks off. A couple napkin sketches, a rough idea of how it's going to be built, where it's going to be built, how much money you have to spend on it, and who the consumer or the runner profile is that you're really trying to meet. So.
Is there a point at which a shoe can be held? So if you come up with a number of ideas, let's say you go to Western States, which I know you've been at, you've paced at, you're on the ground, you are seeing athletes from around the world come to these races, probably in prototypes, in different types of shoes that are doing really well for these athletes or for these brands. Let's say you see something, you see a trend,
Sure.
and you bring that back to headquarters, and you're like, here's where we should be moving in this space. And let's say you get the okay, you get the green light. Is there a point in the process where the higher ups or managers can just basically go, yeah, I don't think this is going to happen. Let's move in this direction and try something new? Or if you're touching a product, is it almost guaranteed of being a tangible something at some point?
Yeah, so that you kind of have to create a risk assessment for something like that. If you wanted to affect something that's more of a staple product in your line, it's a little bit harder, especially if it's a little bit later in the process, because we really like to refine everything as early as possible, or make all the big changes as early as possible. So you're really just refining and fine tuning all the critical elements to make sure it fits and feels and runs the way it should. But if you come away with a pretty spectacular insight, there's a couple ways in which you can kind of inject that insight into future product. Either you plan for it in the next iteration. You say like, hey, we feel that this is a trend. We need to be able to at least deliver on the expectation because the market's moving in this direction. Or in the special case in which you actually get to quickly bring a product to market and it comes kind of from nowhere. I think the Hyperion Elite was an example of that product.
Yeah.
The big swoosh down south from us, they kind of set the bar really high, and they did some incredible things from an innovation standpoint. There's so much looped into that, and I think psychologically it did a lot for any non-Nike athlete, right? And so I think really every brand had to react to this as quickly and as effectively as possible. And they were going off of nothing. It's like, okay, we know Nike had so many years to design, develop, research, refine, and get this to market with the best athletes in the world. and now they have such a huge pool of athletes, which is awesome. But then when, you have athletes from other brands toe the line with athletes wearing the latest and greatest whatever percent shoe, there's an immediate psychological disadvantage. It's like,
Right.
okay, we might have the same PR, or it might be 4 seconds different, but now I know I'm at a slight disadvantage. So that athlete's going back to that brand and saying like, hey, I need something.
Yeah.
And that happened with every brand. And that is why you're seeing all of these carbon plated shoes kind of come out from every brand, within the last year. And so in that case, companies generally make a special exception because they want to make sure that they're delivering for their consumer, their athletes, and putting the best product out there. And it would be done generally on a slightly expedited timeline.
That's amazing insight, because that is exactly where I was going to kind of drive the conversation next, and just in regards to innovation and how you keep up, or how do you go beyond keeping up and actually become innovators. I've got some great questions in the chat room. I'll let Kim take it away.
Yeah, Randy says, like, shoes, it's a copycat business. First it was barefoot, then it was high stack, now it's carbon fiber plates. What do you see as the next trend?
Oh man, trend. So I think a big trend that you're starting to see now, but I think you're going to see more of in the future, are these super foams, and you've seen it coupled with the Vaporfly 4%, the Zoom X foam. It's pretty incredible. It's a pretty incredible material. Brands are really starting to explore the space, and I think there's so much potential here because with innovation, a lot of times people are looking outside the footwear industry for inspiration. You're looking at the automotive industry, you're looking at heavy machinery industry, so on and so forth. And that's truly where you get that next big bump. And that's kind of the biggest trend we're starting to see right now, is these super foams that really have no compromise. So like, I kind of like to think of it as like, okay, traditionally, if we go back 5+ years, you could have a shoe that was really soft, but the compromise was probably weight, and maybe it didn't feel very energizing. It didn't have a lot of energy return. If you wanted something really light, then maybe it felt really hard. It wasn't super durable, didn't have a lot of cushion. And if you wanted something really springy, maybe it was heavy, or there was always a compromise. You're kind of getting to this place where you can have a foam that does it all, that feels soft, that is super light, that is actually really springy. And so I think runners are going to start to demand more of this kind of stuff. I want the full package. I don't just want a shoe that can do X. Like, I want the shoe that feels soft, feels light, feels springy, all in one shoe. And then I want my racing version of it too, or I want my recovery day version of it too. So you kind of amplify those parameters a little bit more.
Yeah, I always look at things as a durability, comfort, and weight. Choose two. You basically
exactly.
are given these three items, and you can't get all three. But that's crazy to think that. I just love the term super foam. I'm going to be using that in probably all my reviews. Is like, this isn't a super foam. It's not even close. But a part of me is like, oh, this is what a cool way to look at the future of shoes, is trying to find this material, talking about different EVAs or TPU type foams, and seeing what Adidas has created with Boost and the marketing around that, the Zoom, the next percent, all these different materials. It'll be really interesting to see how brands compete and innovate. Brooks included in that, without a doubt. I know there's probably very little you can divulge as far as
Tell us all your secrets.
Future tech.
All my secrets. I can say what's out in the market now, but yeah.
Again, let's get some of these live questions. There's a great one in the chat room from Maria and other members of the crew.
Yeah, so for Maria's question, Maria says, I run in La Sportiva and love the sticky rubber, but when recommending shoes, a primary issue is cost. How often does cost of materials or manufacturing play into the decisions on materials and capabilities?
Man, I feel like I'm getting a question from another developer. That is
elite athlete Maria Dalzot.
Yep. Oh yeah. I figured, I was like, Maria, that's she runs yeah. Hello, Maria. Great question. So cost obviously plays a big factor when you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons of shoes. I think ultimately you prioritize what are the key benefits you're trying to deliver with shoes, And so when you prioritize these things, if it's traction, if you're building a trail shoe and you're like, oh, we got the best trail shoe, oh, but our rubber compound is really subpar, it's probably not the best way to prioritize a runner's need when it comes to trail shoes. So you do factor that into your cost. So it's like, hey, if you can afford like really expensive, really sticky rubber, what do you have to kind of give up? So maybe that means going with a slightly less expensive lace or like a few other components that you have to be a little bit smarter in terms of how you pattern them together to get the maximum yield of materials. So you're wasting less essentially. So yeah, and I think a brand like La Sportiva, they have such a heritage, a robust heritage in really sticky compounds. They have a lot of them. That's clearly one of their key priorities as a brand, and that's one of the things that have really built their credibility in the mountains. And so it really comes down to the amount of money you have to play with and then how you prioritize these needs.
That brings me to a really good question just in regards to you as an innovator and your priorities. If you are designing a trail shoe, are you prioritizing the experience of an elite trail runner, an average trail runner? How are you looking at the experience you want them to get out of the shoe? Is this designed for someone who runs a certain pace? Is it designed for someone who weighs a certain weight or might apply a certain amount of pressure to the midsole? How are you approaching priorities when you design trail shoes?
Sure. It comes down to our kind of our muse, or who the ideal trail runner is for this shoe that we want to build. So like, you don't want, if you try and build one shoe that does everything, it's going to do everything probably not so well. So again, kind of comes back to prioritization. But if, it's a very different set of parameters we're working with if we're going to design a shoe for the elite athlete versus a shoe for someone just entering the trail space. There's going to be a lot of different constraints. Not necessarily more constraints or less constraints, just different. The Catamount, for example, was a trail shoe that we had inspiration from the Western States 100. We have a lot of great trail athletes that run for Brooks. And so we gained a lot of really key insights because we wanted, I think in our trail line, we were really lacking that kind of go fast trail racing product. And we knew that, if we're able to deliver something that's robust enough to withstand longer distances, but it was light, it drained well, it provided a lot of protection, it was cushioned, it's going to work for a lot of people who may only take it 10 to 15 miles. Versus the opposite. If we started off with like a trail shoe that's incredibly niche, if we came out with like a 6.5 ounce, like sky running shoe, for example,
right,
probably not going to reach a lot of people with that, and it's not going to resonate with maybe even the core consumer it was built for, because maybe Brooks hasn't kind of gained that level of credibility in the trail space at that time to really know that, like, hey, am I going to spend however many dollars for this shoe? And there are all these other brands that are making shoes like this in this space. So we really have to do something that's authentic to Brooks and authentic to the runner that we're trying to deliver against.
That makes a lot of sense, and it kind of made me think about something else too, just in regards to what people expect. And I'm not saying Brooks has done this, but I've seen other brands release shoes that, as a reviewer, I'll touch and I'll handle and I'll run in and I'll go, what was the idea behind it? Like, who are they catering to in this case? Is it, why are they marketing it to a general audience if it is specifically designed for like a specific type of athlete or that sort of thing? And I always ask those types of questions in my head, just like, what was the point of this? When a brand releases a shoe, do they have those thoughts in mind, or are there moments where they're like, this shoe maybe is meant for elites, but let's market it to the masses? Like, are there moments like that in the process where they go, we got to shift and make this thing widely available so it doesn't lose money or whatever?
Yeah, that could definitely happen. There's definitely conversations that will go on between a product team and marketing and sales. And, all those teams have, we're all steering the ship and we're all going in the same direction. But,
right,
there could be competing priorities from one shoe to the next, just based on what the shoe is. Sales might want the shoe to grow pretty rapidly, but hey, if we as a product team want this shoe to be, pretty limited in terms of the volume and really want to just kind of hit a core demographic of runners, that might pose a conflict. And so we do our best to kind of get ahead of those and be really clear about the expectations of the shoe ahead of time. So that's kind of having a really buttoned up product brief before you even really kind of hit the ground running with the whole product creation process. If you're really, really clear about who this shoe is for, then it makes a lot of things easier down the line, because that's kind of your guiding light throughout the entire process. And it's like, if you start deviating from that, then you realize like, hey, we got to get back on course. And it's more often than not pretty easy to do that, especially if you're kind of starting with a strong central foundation.
That makes perfect sense. And just to give like a very brief sort of look into what I imagine Bryan has to deal with on a regular basis, or just shoe designers in general.
Two comments. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, comments in the chat room.
2 comments back to back.
Catamount, white, no way on white trail shoes. Give it a new color. Very next comment, love the white color on the Catamount.
Yep. So we had I mean, I totally get it. And part of it is knowing that you're going to be polarizing. You're never going to please everyone, and it's okay. And we had those conversations, because there were a lot of people internally that said the same thing, like, no, we don't want white. Other people, yes, we love white. It's bold. There's function behind it. It lets the shoe be, your canvas for the trails. And so that was a lot of the marketing that went behind it. But at the same time, it's good when you get polarizing feedback, because you know that you're making an impact and you're hopefully progressing product forward. So we love those comments, and I think it really helps us kind of think how we need to progress into the future. And by the way, the Catamount will come out later with additional non-white colorways. So we will have that in the future. Hot tip.
I knew in the review, because I mentioned that. I mentioned the color being a thing that I was like, wow, I don't know. I was mixed on it. I got the higher element thinking behind it, the design of, paint it with your dirt and your story. Totally got that. And in my review, I remember commenting just in regards to the color, like, I don't know if I like a white shoe because it's just going to get dirty, and I don't look at it as like a story. I look at it as just dirt. That being said, you did the success is in the fact that I talked about it, is in the success that people talk about it. Sure. And as someone who's dealt with PR in the past and who loves marketing and loves the idea of innovating marketing and getting people to talk about a product, I'm fascinated by that. And so I knew a little bit behind this was, you make a shoe that's going to be polarizing, not in performance. The performance is good, but in looks, which is really objective, and you get people to talk about it. And that's exactly what happened with the Catamount. People either loved it or hated it, but regardless, they were talking about it, and they couldn't deny the performance.
Yeah, that was, I'll be honest, so that was one of the fastest shoes we brought to market. I think, we were super dialed with our insights. Like I said, we work with an incredible team of athletes, and we were super focused from day one. And the leadership was like, yeah, go get it. And I think, we brought that shoe to market in well under a year from the initial concept to getting to market, or actually being done, not and produced. But we're sitting around and we have this idea for this shoe early on, and then the later and later you get in the creation cycle, you're just like, oh man, I'm sick of looking at white. Like, let's just, they'll send like, I'll ask for a slight pattern adjustment or a tweak in the upper. They'll send it back to me, and it's with any available existing materials they have at our development center in Asia, and it comes back in like some random colorway, and you're like, that is awesome. Yeah, that's refreshing. But you're like, no, like stick with the story, stick to your guns, keep this going. It's only because like you get tired of looking at it for a while because you've just been working on it for so long. So.
Do you? This is going to be a deep dive. Do you know what were the dots on the upper design? What were those dots representing?
Yeah. So it's kind of the three elements of the earth that inspired the shoe. So the yellow is the sun, the blue is water, and then the brown is Earth. Like the terrain or the trails. Yeah. Yep. And the shoe was very, very much inspired, like I said, by the Western States Endurance Run. Just all the elements of it it's a hot race, and so the white helps deflect, the UV rays that we had. Those kind of slits in the mudguard that go all the way around the toe cap, that helps with drainage. The lugs were a certain height because it helps optimize traction in harder surfaces over like something really loose and muddy. So a lot of those design and development decisions were very specific to courses like that. So,
I'm much more aware in the last 5 years. I've just become much more aware, especially talking to someone like you and just sort of being more familiar with the industry at large. Every shoe is designed with their purposeful decisions. It's not, like you said, the Catamount was probably one of the faster shoes that came to development. How long do you think you worked on that shoe, though?
Let me see. I think our first working prototype was April of 2019.
Just before States, a couple months.
Just before States, yep. So that basically means I think we kicked the shoe off like at the end of 2018, early 2019. I think it was maybe January 2019. Yeah, and the shoe is pretty much done basically by the beginning of this year. So, we were just waiting for it to go to market, which was awesome to see. So.
It's just kind of crazy to think about that timeline. I promised I would talk a little bit about it just in regards to a shoe being developed. It goes through a long process of development plus iterations where you're trying to tweak things from foam to outsole to upper. And all the design elements are, this is a great example of a shoe with design elements that were purposefully chosen for specific reasons. Like you're talking outsole is designed for the hot California single track. The color is designed to reflect heat, the drain holes, like all of these things. Anytime I touch a shoe, because of shoes like Catamount, I try to find these details. I try to look at it and go, well, what was the reasoning behind this?
Sure.
I think it's brilliant. And
or even like the Easter eggs of the shoe.
Yeah, the Easter eggs are great. That's a great point. Are there Easter eggs in shoes? Like the Catamount aside, let's include the Catamount. Are there Easter eggs in shoes that you've designed that like maybe just the internal department knows about?
Oh man. So I don't know if we still do this today, but I know that, at least a little bit back in the day, people would put their initials into the top side of a midsole in the midsole mold. Not that anyone's just going to rip the top of an upper off of a sole unit and see those
I have,
initials, but
this is weird because I've seen weird initials in midsoles before. I don't know if I didn't know what it was. Maybe that's what it is. That's crazy.
Yeah, you have that. I mean, you have other like text on there. There's like mold codes and whatnot, but you also have, people who will leave like slight hidden details every once in a while. A designer's touch in a sense, and a lot of times it's kind of it's attributed to the team that worked on the shoe or the runner we're trying to target. I think our designer Ross on the Catamount did an incredible job putting my crew on the medial, on the inside of the heel area. Just it's super thoughtful. It speaks to the community that trail running is. And so that was an incredibly thoughtful touch that I think went a long way with the shoe.
I'm gonna go cut my Catamounts open, see if I can find like a tiny little print of Brian's face in there.
I like that it's his face.
Yeah.
Hi, it's me. We do again have some wonderful live questions. I'll let Kim get to some of those before we wrap up and go to the after show.
And quickie question.
Question
from John. John says, what about more customization with production technology and the ability to quickly do 3D scans? Why not have truly customized shoes?
Oh, man. Another great question. So that's the future. I would say, the question earlier was like, what's kind of the next trend? Super foams is what is starting to trend now. I think the step after that is fully customized or personalized shoes. There's a massive logistical infrastructure that goes into personalization. And that's probably the biggest hurdle. And it's probably why no brand has truly been able to deliver on that yet. But to John's point, like the fact that we have so many more like rapid prototyping capabilities really helps launch us into the future, I think. And really every brand is working through some sort of problem set similar to this. Because, yeah, like who wouldn't want a shoe that's designed, developed, and built for them based on their biomechanical needs, their running needs. Not to mention, the ability to, hopefully, change with you over time. But at the same time, figuring out the back end of something like that is an immense chore. So, I think, like I said, every brand is definitely exploring that space. So it's a very cool world that we're trending into, I think.
Tech really gets me excited in the sense that it's constantly innovating. Where we were 10 years ago is completely different to where we are today and what we're capable of doing today and create today. I imagine in your space, you have to stay up to date. You have to be constantly researching, constantly innovating within your own field, your own company, and your own team. Is there anything you can share with us as far as what's around the bend? Are there any shoes that you're working on right now that you're like, yeah, this is pretty cool. It's something you should keep your eyes open for, or something that you're really excited about?
Oh man. So, without divulging too much, I'll say, I think generally speaking, the DNA flash foam that we launched into the Hyperion Tempo, the Catamount, and then the soon-to-be released Hyperion Elite 2, that foam technology will start to evolve and proliferate a little bit more through the line, but in its own way. So, DNA flash is a very deliberately focused foam for performance. Lightweight, going fast, and it has all these amazing physical properties. But we're looking at ways at how you might manipulate that into other applications. So that's what I'm excited about in the near term. But that's probably all I can say about that.
I guess I wanted to ask specifically the Hyperion Series, knowing that the Hyperion Series, dealing with the Olympic trials and having to create these amazing shoes to put on your elite athletes' feet. Can we expect to see some innovation there, some changes in that line that's going to come to market soon? Yeah,
so I think there are starting to be some initial reviews that are popping up around the Hyperion Elite 2, and I know that I probably caused a little bit of buzz because all of our elite athletes at the Olympic marathon trials, including Des Linden, were wearing that shoe. And, that was we wanted to make sure we were doing everything we could for the athlete there. And we are extremely excited for that shoe because I think, it not only works for the tip of the spear elite runner and delivers on all their needs, but it's going to be a little bit more accessible than a lot of the other shoes out there.
Sweet.
So that's something I believe you might be getting a pair to review, hopefully.
You got a pair of something today.
I did get a pair of something from Brooks today.
Oh, maybe
they're in the quarantine room. So I don't know if they came from Brooks or Running Warehouse, but they're in the quarantine room. I can't actually wait to open the box. I wanted to do it before the show, but I didn't have.
I looked in the box. They look fancy.
Do they look fancy? Ooh, I should have gotten them for the show.
I couldn't tell you what they were because I actually didn't read what they were.
I am quite excited because I've been wanting to review those and check those out. Quick question before we move into the quickie question quiz and highlighting our GR Crew Member of the Week. How many shoe prototypes, shoe pieces do you think you have in your office? Because I got a chance to visit your desk and I know that you are surrounded by prototypes and products that you have worked on over the years. How many do you think you have? Or even shoes in your closet? How many shoes do you think you have?
So it's a little bit embarrassing, but so since the work from home thing has been very much real for the last several months, our home office has pretty much turned into that sample room. So I think I just look behind me. I probably have 200 shoes in this room.
Yes,
it's pretty embarrassing.
That is. Be proud of that. That is amazing.
It's just making you feel a bit better about your shoe situation. That's why you're so excited.
I only have 150. This is great.
and not to mention my actual shoes downstairs in the basement, and I think that's another 150 pairs or something like that. There are frequent runs to shoe donations made. I got to keep rotating shoes out. So yeah, but there's a lot of shoes. It's a real fire hazard, I'll be honest.
Do you have anything in your home that if I mean, God forbid, like something happened to them, you lost them, or they got left on the trail or something like that.
Or Cedar ate them.
Or your pup Cedar ate them. Do you have anything in your home that would be not great to lose? Like, do you have prototypes that you only have one of?
No, because they always keep a half pair with our development center in Asia. So in the event, something were to happen to it, there is a replacement. But there's a couple that are probably more under the radar that I prefer not to lose.
Sure.
Or have eaten by Cedar. Yeah.
And I think finally, is there anything I can do as a shoe reviewer that helps you, that helps designers of shoes across the globe? Anything that I can do to help educate watchers, viewers, in the process? Anything that I can implement that might help the whole process?
Man, I mean, first off, I think you do an awesome job already. I love how your reviews have evolved over time. I think ultimately it's just pure honesty, because when, sometimes you read reviews and you're just like, man, I feel like that person's not really getting to the point of what they're trying to say because maybe they're afraid they're going to hurt someone's feelings, or they just don't like to say anything negative. I think like feedback, whether it's good, bad, as long as it's constructive, is always something that's super helpful for us as a product team. And honestly, it helps keep us grounded, because we're not going to hit a home run every single time. We know that, every once in a while there'll be a bad apple, and like we might, something might go to market and it's just like, man, I really wanted another crack at that. But, we either ran out of time, there was a cost constraint, there was something that potentially hindered that. And, just getting that honest feedback, I think really just helps brands grow in general. So yeah, I would say that is probably the biggest thing. And you already do that. So keep doing it.
I appreciate that. And it's something that I've wanted to do since day one, just, being truthful and honest and whatever my experience is. I've really only got one response from a company that was very nasty.
That was also like, hey, everyone else, go sick 'em. Like they basically sent people at you.
Yeah,
oh, no.
Companies and their ambassadors are funny in the sense that a company can take those ambassadors and use them as weapons.
There was one company, one time.
But that was it. It was, and ever since then, I feel like it's been. Companies love the feedback. We get lots of companies that will email and say, "Hey, I saw your review of blank, and it was great. It was truthful and honest."
Or ask for more questions or more photos of our specific shoes, because we've had specific things that
people will, designers or departments will ask for. Hey, can you send your shoes back? We would love to look at and how that breaks down and stuff like that, which I imagine happens quite frequently. Yeah. Our conversation tonight with Bryan Bhark was wonderful, and I feel like just scratched the surface of. I promise getting deep into the weeds. I don't think we even touched the grass.
I feel like we can definitely have Bryan on again in the future. If
Bryan, if you're open to it, if you would come back, we would absolutely have you back on in the future. We just have sort of reached we've gone over an hour already in the main show. But what I would love to do, Bryan, is because
you're getting all choked up and upset because the show's end.
I'm so sad.
Yeah, I know.
We do something here with our first-time guests. It's called the Quickie Question Quiz. It's very easy. It's a rapid-fire series of 10-ish questions. All you got to do is answer with the first thing that comes to your head. When you give us a thumbs up, we'll just rip on through. There it is. What was your very first race?
Philadelphia Marathon 2000.
That's a pretty damn big first race. That's great. Favorite place to run currently?
Wonderland Trail, as opposed
Beautiful
to
place.
this past weekend. Yeah.
Bryan just posted some, or I guess some of the photos you sent. Were those from Wonderland this weekend, the ones that you just sent?
Yeah, the one that you used. Adam actually took that picture. Yeah, it was
Sweet.
Towards the end of the day. It was pretty awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. Road or trails?
Trails.
Bucket list race, or in this case, maybe bucket list FKT?
Ooh. I would say Stevens to Snoqualmie, Section J.
Section
PCT.
J. Oof. Favorite running movie?
Oh, man. The Prefontaine movie. I can't think of the name. But, yeah.
Pre?
Yes, that one. It escaped my mind.
Guilty pleasure TV show?
Silicon Valley. Reruns.
I like that show.
Reruns.
Yeah, we love that show.
Nothing
I
wrong
don't
with reruns.
Yeah, I don't watch a ton of TV, but that was probably the show that I most recently wrapped up watching again, and it was just enjoyable.
Could you relate to it? Just kind of the behind the scenes, like, not that Brooks is a tech company, but are there things that you could relate to? Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Completely different industry, so much to relate to.
I imagine. Yeah. Favorite pre-race meal?
Whole wheat pasta with a little bit of chicken, red sauce. Pretty simple.
Favorite post-race meal?
Anything available at the free food stand post-race.
And finally, what are your current running kicks? What are the shoes that you are wearing on your feet for your runs these days?
Catamount and early prototypes of the next version. Something else. Yes. Those are my go-to kicks right now.
In that case, Bryan, we need to go for a run immediately.
Yeah. Or like the next time we see you, it's going to be right down to your shoes.
And if you wake up in the woods because you got knocked out, I don't know what happened. I have no shoes. You passed. Congratulations.
Yay.
You passed the quickie question quiz. Well done, Bryan.
Thank you.
Our guest tonight is Bryan Bhark, Senior Innovation Developer with Brooks Running. And we got to talk about shoes the whole show, which to me is A-OK. Bryan, can you remind people where they can find you on social media, where they can maybe follow up with additional questions or just sort of see what you're up to or the products that you make? Where can they find you?
Sure. So my Instagram handle is Bryan Bhark, BRYBHARK, or if you just search for my name, Bryan Bhark, that'll come up. I'm also on Strava and Twitter. And then really, like, you can reach out to me, through any of those mediums. I think I'm pretty easy to find. I'm happy to talk shoes anytime. So, or all things running as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Our guest tonight, Bryan Bhark, just a wonderful human for sharing a little bit of his experience, his work, a little bit behind the scenes with us. We just appreciate him and what he does. He's also super fast. Didn't even get to talk about the TMT, FKT, or any of that kind of stuff tonight.
I know.
Yeah, crazy. We will have to have Bryan back on. We like to recognize members of the community at the end of our show and what we like to call our GR Crew Member of the Week. Kim, who is our GR Crew Member of the Week?
This week's GR Crew Member of the Week is Angie Carlton. And Angie writes in to say, I wanted to finish the great virtual race across Tennessee with a big accomplishment, so I set my sights off on finishing my first 80-mile week. So the last 80 miles with the goal of an 80-mile week. And Angie nailed it, and she wrapped up her virtual run with an 81.7-mile week.
Damn.
Which is
well
massive.
Done.
Congratulations, Angie.
Angie's been a longtime supporter in the chat room often. So, Angie, well done. You are a GR Crew Member of the Week. That's going to wrap up our main show. We are going to move into our after show with Bryan. Kim has a bunch of questions that she pulled aside here. If you have any additional questions, you may want to jump into that after show. We're going to try to rip through as many as possible in a short amount of time. So, if you'd like to join us for our after shows, all you got to do is go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner, and you can join us there for all of our after shows, archive shows, our daily live streams, everything. It is worth it. We appreciate it, and it helps us out. That's it. Get out there, train as hard as you can, virtually race harder, and party the hardest. I know I am. We'll see you guys next week for more. Goodbye.
Goodbye.